industry mentors are presenting their work today. So thank you for joining us as we are in the final stages of judging. Of course, this year we're doing it a little differently. Last year we were presenting at the University of Toronto, and because of the pandemic, we've of course taken the event virtual. We are asking everyone to introduce yourselves in the group chat. So your name, workplace, employer, and graduation year and program if you attended U of T. Okay, so this year's competition, what's the theme? Of course, every year we have a theme, and this is our second competition where, of course, we're looking at transportation network resiliency in the age of COVID-19 and beyond. So, you know, the competition is really important because we really try to encourage teams that are multidisciplinary, up to 3 to 4 student members each, at varying U of T departments. And we're really trying to create an environment that as we prepare them for the real life, they have to work with each other. So today's agenda, we have 6 really exciting research topics our students will be reviewing with us. We're going to take a judging break and we will be announcing the results. So we're going to learn a lot about equity, bike share, on-demand transit, airport operations, to say the least. So we would like to firstly thank and welcome our judges. We have a great panel today. So I would like to just introduce our judges. So first and foremost, David is a manager in transportation engineering at IBI, where he manages projects across a variety of transportation planning, subspecialties including strategic planning, travel demand modeling, travel forecasting, and trend analysis. David is a U of T alumni with a Master's of Applied Science in Civil Engineering from the university. Our second judge, Michelle, is a manager, area transportation planning at the City of Toronto, and was previously project leader at the City of Mississauga. Michelle helps to facilitate evolution in the mobility system and enjoys the intersections of diversity and inclusion, data governance, and new mobility. Michelle is a U of T alumni with a Master's of Science and Planning from the university's Department of Geography and Planning, where she is also currently a course instructor for the graduate capstone project course. Welcome, Michelle. Finally, Tyrone from HDR is a Senior Vice President at HDR Corporation and has held roles and undertaken work throughout Canada during his career. Tyrone is an experienced transportation planner with an engineer who believes in improving transportation accessibility for all users and working collaboratively to develop creative planning and engineering solutions. So Tyrone is a U of T alumni with a Bachelor of Applied Science in Civil Engineering and a Master's of Applied Science in Transportation Planning, both from the university. Welcome, Tyrone. So what are we here for? So we're looking at the presentations. It's making up 40% of the scoring. The students have submitted their papers and research earlier in the month. And of course, the prizes up for grabs, first place, $550 per student, $450 second place, and third place, $375 per student. And this is really important for those who aren't aware. Typically from the alumni event, we have our sponsors and the proceeds go, in addition to supporting the alumni mixer, towards this event as well. So thank you so much for everyone for joining us today. So without further, why am I discussing this further? Let's present the first student presentations. I'd like to introduce the team number 1, Equitable Transportation in the Age of COVID-19. Maria, Vincent, Dorothy, and Calvin will be presenting. Special thanks to their mentors, Malvika and Patrick. Their topic today, they're studying how to leverage transit data and public health and safety measures to inform policy changes that will promote transportation equity in the post-COVID-19 GTHA. So I'm going to hand it over to Maria.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. And while Maria gets her presentation up, I'll just remind the teams that you have 10 minutes to present. When there are 3 minutes left, I will put a message in the chat box reminding you that there are 3 minutes left. And when there's 1 minute left, I will do my best to butt in the least invasive way possible to give a 1 minute left heads up warning. So please be aware you have until 5:20.
Okay, thank you. Calvin, whenever you're ready.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation on equitable transportation in the age of COVID-19. My name is Calvin, and here we also have Dorothy, Maria, and Vincent. So for tonight, our agenda is as follows, where we will be discussing each item in detail, and we'll start with some background information for context. So many Canadians, especially those in marginalized communities, rely on affordable transportation, such as public transit and active transportation to access essential services. However, their options are often limited due to poor transportation infrastructure in their communities. The equity gap has been especially heightened during the pandemic due to the service reductions and unsafe commuting conditions. So this poses the question of how do we address existing inequalities highlighted by COVID-19? And with this in mind, our team focused on a multi-pronged approach to address this issue. We investigated how transit data is being collected from various transit agencies, as well as public health and safety measures to inform transportation policy that would improve equity. And we then interviewed 3 transportation agencies, Winnipeg Transit, TransLink Vancouver, and the Seattle Department of Transportation, to gain insight on our own research questions and their approach to managing transportation equity before and during the pandemic. So next, Dorothy will begin by discussing the recommendations to transit data and public health and safety.
Okay, thank you, Calvin. First, we have transit data, which refers to data collected and distributed by transit agencies. These data can be real-time, such as bus arrival predictions and detour information. Data can also be recorded and uploaded to central servers for further analysis, which we call historical data. Historical data is used primarily for service adjustments and monitoring long-term system performance. It can also be used to identify transit-dependent populations and leads to investment decisions, which will be further discussed in the policy change section. So the first recommendation is to provide flexible transit service adjustments using transit data to ensure that demands are being met. In the GTHA, many buses are equipped with automatic passenger counters and fare boxes, which can record crowding level and transit usage by route and by time of day. Transit agencies can then temporarily increase service levels using this information to reduce crowding and facilitate social distancing. These adjustments will be route specific, thus easier, quicker, and cheaper to implement than a fleet-wide schedule change. Recommendation 2 is to use transit data to identify underutilized transit routes and replace them with on-demand transit, which refers to door-to-door service that can be booked in advance or in real time to connect passengers from their homes to transit hubs. On-demand transit allows transit agencies to eliminate routes with low ridership to save money while maintaining service frequencies on trunk routes, which the majority of the transit riders use. The next topic is transportation public health and safety, which should not only prevent the spread of diseases, but also enable and encourage active transportation, such as walking and cycling. Since the GTHA, especially the City of Toronto, has invested a lot in active transportation in the past few months, the recommendations that we propose will focus on the safety aspect. So our first recommendation is for transit agencies to invest in public health and safety initiatives and communicate them to riders so they're taking advantage of. One initiative could be to invest in contactless open payment, meaning that people can tap their bank cards to pay for a trip, thus minimizing cash handling, interactions with drivers, as well as having to use the fare vending machines. Our second recommendation is company-wide working from home policy, which means that people who can work from home should keep working from home until the pandemic is under control. Working from home will reduce transportation demand during the pandemic and allow social distancing for essential workers on transit, as well as helping them get to work quicker, regardless of which mode of transportation they use. And like Calvin mentioned before, transit data and public health and safety measures will serve as the basis for recommendations for policy change, which Maria and Vincent will discuss now.
Thank you, Dorothy. So transportation policies have the potential to drastically change travel behavior and to improve access to transportation for underserved communities. In this section, we will discuss 2 types of policies: infrastructure investment and transportation demand management, or TDM. Infrastructure investment is critical to building an equitable transportation network, while TDM can be used to encourage travelers to take advantage of these investments. Infrastructure investment involves three aspects: investing in active and sustainable modes of transportation, engaging communities in the decision-making process, and ensuring equitable access to transportation. The first recommendation for infrastructure investment is funding for transit and active modes of transportation. As Dorothy mentioned, agencies can leverage transit data collected during the pandemic to identify transit-dependent communities which would benefit from increased investment. Investment profiles should also include an analysis of their impact on various equity indicators, such as mobility, safety, and accessibility. The second recommendation is meaningful stakeholder engagement for the Transportation Master Plan. This involves engaging communities directly, promoting diversity in transportation planning agencies, and forming a transportation equity work group in the GTHA, based on our discussion with the Seattle Department of Transportation. The third recommendation is implementing low-income transit access programs, which involves subsidizing transit passes for low-income individuals, either fully or partially. The final recommendation is scenario-based modeling and infrastructure planning to assess the impacts of the pandemic on the transportation network. This involves an analysis of transportation demand and supply interactions within the GTHA under various scenarios, which can address the uncertainty caused by the pandemic. For all of the infrastructure investment recommendations, a regionalized approach is recommended to avoid displacing low-income communities and to ensure that various transit agencies are included in the investment practices. With these recommended infrastructure investment policies, I'll pass it on to Vincent to discuss how transportation demand management can be used to take advantage of these investments in the GTHA.
Thanks, Maria. Transportation demand management at its core is about using transportation resources efficiently and sustainably. It most commonly involves programs and the related outreach that influence users to use active and sustainable modes of transportation, and away from single occupancy vehicles, like Smart Commute. The first recommendation is for municipalities to enhance the TDM policy framework as they update their goals to conform to Growth Plan 2019, creating clear goals such as fossil fuel usage and drive-alone rates. This way, TDM-related projects can be assessed more clearly. The next recommendation is to create TDM strategies for land developers. It's important that both the municipality and land developers are in accord with TDM measures to take throughout the process, such that the impacts on the transportation network due to greater volume are lessened. The third recommendation is related to incentivizing and disincentivizing modes. Incentivizing modes tends to work better than disincentivizing modes because changing general attitudes towards active and sustainable transportation benefits individuals who rely on these modes the most. The next recommendation is about outreach. It's important to communicate to local community members about their transportation options. Communication should be done in many languages to accommodate non-English speakers. The fifth and sixth recommendations are about long-term plans. Using data, such as transit data and general transportation trend data, it's needed to make informed decisions to assess the success of TDM projects. Then, once we know what works well in a GTHA context, GTHA-wide TDM policies can be created that are of mutual benefit to all municipalities involved, as suggested by guidelines of Metrolinx's 2041 Regional Transportation Plan.
Thank you, Vincent. So ultimately, these recommendations aim to provide attainable goals and guidelines for transit agencies and policymakers within the GTHA. This would help improve transportation equity even beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. Transportation equity is a social issue with many deep-rooted causes that span beyond the transportation sector. So the GTHA should implement a comprehensive action plan to build upon the recommendations presented tonight. And with that, I would like to thank everyone for listening and engaging with us on our presentation.
Thank you. That was right on time. I feel like we should unmute to clap. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Team One. Judges.
Okay, thanks very much to the four of you for that presentation. Transportation equity is a very complex topic, and it's something that is getting the attention that it deserves now. Broadly, even before the pandemic, that was something that we saw as an emerging area, and something that our clients were asking about a lot. I'm interested in getting your perspectives on how you develop ways of measuring the effectiveness of your proposals. So, you're interested in equity, you're proposing things to make the transportation system more equitable. How do you go about convincing the people that you're making these recommendations to that your proposals are working? So once things are put out into the field, how do we know that they're making a difference?
I think that's a great question. We did consider various key performance indicators for different aspects of our proposal. So for example, if you're looking at infrastructure investment, a great example of key performance indicators would be Seattle's Racial Equity Toolkit. So that's a great way of assessing the impact that infrastructure investments have on racial equity goals that they've outlined. And I know that we also have some TDM KPIs. Vincent, if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, for sure. With the TDM KPIs, when we were developing the TDM section, we looked at the 4 KPIs in particular that can be used to assess the TDM projects. They stem from Metrolinx's big move that was the predecessor to the regional transportation plan for 2041, and we just wanted to make sure that we were following them. And part of the means of assessing how successful these projects are is the outreach and actually going into the local communities and seeing if they're actually benefiting from our changes in TDM and infrastructure.
That's great, and I'm going to pivot off that last part of your answer there. Maybe you can describe a little bit or explain a little bit what some of the shortcomings of a KPI approach might be when you're talking about equity. In other words,
Yeah,
what does that miss?
For sure. And part of the problem when we're developing the KPIs is we're not always considering the stakeholders and the people we're trying to benefit the most. So when we just use a set of KPIs, it's still important that we're taking a local approach and making sure that it's working well for them, and using just the KPIs as a guideline, not so much as an ultimate means of measuring.
Right, thank you very much. My co-judges, do you guys have any questions?
Tyrone Gann here. My compliments to the team. Job well done. My question is related to the 15 recommendations. So how would you prioritize them? What would be the top 3 and why?
That's a great question. I think number 1 priority, in my opinion, would be investing in transit and active modes of transportation. As effective as TDM can be, it ultimately won't do anything if the infrastructure is not available for people to use. But we have to be smart about how we're investing in the infrastructure, and it has to actually directly benefit communities. So I would say that is a top priority, I think.
Yeah, and just to add on that, since we're still in the middle of a pandemic, we do need to prioritize recommendations that would make an impact in the short term. So for example, flexible transit service adjustments using transit data would be a great recommendation to prioritize right now because it ties directly into our daily lives, whereas something maybe in the midterm or the long term, such as scenario-based modeling and infrastructure planning would be a long-term recommendation to do in the future, whereas in the short term, it's very important to keep transit running and to implement such working from home policies to make sure that people can get to where they need to be during the pandemic.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I had a question that was actually from your paper, but I think the audience would be interested too. And you had a few great case studies in your work, and I wondered if you could just speak a little bit about how you chose the cities you chose and what you think is the most exciting thing to sort of take away from that, looking outward.
Sure. I guess we can start with transit data. We interviewed TransLink and Winnipeg Transit because GTHA consists of the Greater Toronto Area, but also smaller municipalities such as Hamilton. So we interviewed Winnipeg Transit because the network and so they only have buses, and so the mode of transportation is very similar to what Hamilton has. So we wanted a perspective from a medium to smaller size agency to complement our studies of the GTHA area. And then TransLink was selected because TransLink has been a pioneer in transit technology in Canada. They were actually the first agency to implement open payment across all their network. And they're also a comparable size to TTC, which is why we chose them as our other case study for transit data. And for public health and safety, we actually chose the City of Toronto for our case study, since the City of Toronto has implemented many great measures since the beginning of the pandemic, such as implementing bike lanes and quiet streets. So we thought we have a very good local example, so we went ahead with City of Toronto for public health and safety.
And for infrastructure investment, we decided to interview the Seattle Department of Transportation, primarily for their Seattle Transportation Benefit District proposal, or STBD, which is essentially implementing a sales tax to fund transit and transportation initiatives in the downtown core of Seattle. We thought that was a very interesting initiative that could be applied to the GTHA. And it was massively successful in the past, and they're looking to renew it this year. We also did some research on Metro in Portland, and the reason for that is for their Get Moving 2020 initiative, which essentially involves massively investing in transit infrastructure, but also creating investment portfolios with various community level KPIs such as mobility and safety and displacement indicators. So we thought that was very interesting.
Great. Well, thank you for the tour.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Team One. So, so introducing our second team. All right, here we go. Team two, their topic, Beyond Downtown, Strategies to Expand Bike-Share Toronto in the Suburbs. Please help me in welcoming Amy, Drisha, and Pooja, and special thanks to mentors Katie and Matt. This project seeks to increase transportation options and improve equity in access to Bike-Share Toronto through investigating opportunities for network expansion and proposing options to address financial and structural barriers to use. So I'll just hand over the screen to Drisha. Oops.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, we can see it. You may want to exit the downloads bar at the bottom though, because I can see that on mine. Perfect. And you have until 5:30.
Yeah, sure.
I mean 5:40. Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Drisha, and today I and my groupmates Pooja and Amy will be presenting our research on expanding Bike-Share Toronto to the suburbs as a potential transportation mode during the COVID era. The current pandemic has disrupted cities across the world in all the spectrums, transportation being one of them. Offices switching to work from home and reduced capacity of transit vehicles to control the outbreak has caused significant changes in the commuting patterns across the city. Because of these reduced capacities, some of the transit routes observed crowding in the past few months. This was a map released by TTC in June. And as you can see, the yellow areas, which is in the northwest and southeast of Toronto, depict the intersections where maximum crowding occurred. Also, these routes are situated in areas which lie outside of the core of the city, where there is relatively lesser transportation alternatives for people to make safe commute during times like COVID. Hence, to keep up with the current situation and to align with the COVID norms, city officials in many ways have focused to build connectivity for active transportation. But with most of these initiatives happening in the core, we wanted to explore some of the potential transit alternatives for suburban crowd as well, as it would help in mitigating the current crowding crisis, as well as increase the connectivity within the city. Therefore, to address the current crowding issues, why do we think that bike share has a potential alternative to meet the current transit needs? Firstly, because it takes people off transit and acts as an alternative to complete the journey. Secondly, it avoids many of the common barriers to biking, such as bike purchasing cost, safe storage spaces, and bike maintenance and upkeep. And last but not the least, we wanted to investigate the equity component as to who dominates the present network. Toronto's network is centered around and primarily benefits most advantaged Torontonians. And as evidently seen in the map, the presence of bike share, that is in the green circles, is lesser in the suburbs. The reports have also suggested that majority of the users of bike share in the North American cities are white and employed with higher levels of income and education than the general population. Those with low vehicle access may stand to gain more from bike share systems as they depend more on alternative transportation modes, including walking and public transit. Therefore, the focus of our project was to look at how to expand the bike share Toronto network to create a second hub that would provide service to the suburbs. And hence, to conduct an analysis, we went through literature reviews and reviewed various case studies of bike share systems in North America. We spoke with industry professionals to understand the current planning and operation and gathered TTS data to study the origin and destination trends of our selected sites. Over to Pooja.
Thanks, Risha. Based on the findings from our interviews, literature review, and spatial analysis, we divided our proposal in two different sections. 1, bike share Scarborough expansion, and 2, making bike share successful in suburbs by identifying and addressing the barriers. After our initial round of literature reviews and information gathering from interviewees, out of 5 potential areas, we identified Scarborough Centre as an area with both need of a transportative alternative as well as a strong potential for success. This was influenced by the 6 following indicators. The first indicator is origin and destination map analysis. In order to determine where trips are being made in Scarborough, we use Toronto Transportation Survey 2016 data to map the number of trips by traffic zone.
You have to see this though. This is like peak Pooja. She's talking about how, oh, you can't hear. How do I? Not on camera, right? No.
Shaliza, can you mute yourself, please? Thanks. Sorry about that. Please go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. So in order to determine where trips are being made in Scarborough, we used Toronto Transportation Survey 2016 data to map the number of trips by traffic zone with an origin and destination in Planning District 13 and 14. The darker areas in both maps on left side show the highest concentration of origin and destinations. The lines on the other map to the right are weighted to represent the number of trips along a specific path. Majority of the trips were found to be within a 5 kilometer of radius, which is a bikeable radius. Based on this finding, we narrowed down our study specifically to this concentration area and verified the other indicators. The second indicator is proximity to transit. As we can see in the map, Scarborough Centre is the last major station on line 2. The third indicator is proximity to growth area. Scarborough Centre is identified in Toronto's growth plan as an urban growth centre. The fourth indicator is proximity to institution and destinations. The selected site area has a concentration of major institutions like Sunningdale College and similar big institutions and recreational spaces. The last two indicators are neighborhood improvement area, which is illustrated in red on the map, and the employment concentration area, which is shown in blue on the map. As seen, most of the selected areas falls under both the indicator zones. Based on site analysis, we proposed Scarborough bike share expansion in phases. Phase 1 is proposed along Ellesmere Road with Scarborough Center as a core, and later for phase 2, it expands radially towards Shepherd Avenue and Lawrence Avenue. Over to Amy.
So while a portion of our project looked at where to expand the network, perhaps even more importantly, we looked at what it would really take to make bike share successful in the suburbs. And the first thing we looked at was affordability. So the current system, payment system in Toronto is that there are short-term passes for amounts of time less than 72 hours, and then there are also annual passes. And the upfront $100 cost of an annual membership is a significant financial barrier to many people for use. So to ensure the financial accessibility of the system to people of all income levels, there really needs to be a low income pass, something that's used in many other cities and even in Toronto for the TTC. We do note that a second option is to implement a monthly pass, though it doesn't remove the financial barrier to the same extent. It does, at least there's less of an upfront cost. In most suburban areas, there are large distances between destinations, and as a result, trips tend to be longer, they're often less frequent, and people tend to be carrying more at a time. E-bikes help mitigate the challenges of distance and make the system functional for people with a range of abilities. And then secondly, increasing the storage capacity of bikes, such as through more baskets, through carriers that attach to the back of a bike, and allow bike share to be more practical for daily use. Clearly, safe physical infrastructure is an essential part of making a bike share system feasible in the suburbs. There has to be a commitment to advancing the safety of vulnerable road users through providing accessible biking routes. And one example is through using the space in the suburbs surrounding sidewalks to create multi-use paths, which can be kind of a quick implementation that doesn't involve big road work projects. But we also recognize that for many people on our streets, cars are not the only safety threat. Systemic racism in our society means that certain bodies are over-policed, and the very public act of cycling can put individuals at risk. So our commitment, therefore, must not just be to building safety through infrastructure, but also in addressing the racism that puts racialized individuals in danger as they ride and move in public space, and also through working to create a culture of biking that doesn't perpetuate the othering of BIPOC riders. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, Toronto benefits from really strong community organizations that are deeply rooted in their local context. And this provides two really important opportunities. Firstly, it provides the opportunity for collaboration in designing a system through the incorporation of local knowledge and expertise that's very context specific. That's a really important part of making a successful system. And secondly, it provides the opportunity to provide education. People need to see themselves represented and feel an ownership over their system in order to really take advantage of it. And so partnering with community organizations to deliver things such as community bike days, introductory rides, group tours, booths at community events, all these kinds of things are really important for the success of a system. And so briefly, we'll leave you with these three recommendations. The first is to provide bike share infrastructure in equity-seeking communities through intentional expansion. The second is to ensure that the system is practical and usable by developing a low fare paths using e-assist bikes and committing to advancing safety. And then finally, to embrace community partnerships as an opportunity to promote education and the socialization of cycling. Ultimately, we believe that Bike Share Toronto can play an essential role in providing transportation as the city moves forward. But unless there are conscious efforts to make it accessible to all Torontonians, it further contributes to systems of inequity that have been highlighted by COVID-19. So a big thank you to you guys for listening, and especially to Matt and Katie, our mentors, and to all the people who gave their time to be interviewed and contributed their really valuable insights to this. Oh, and thank you also to the Transportation Alumni Committee as well.
Well, thank you very much, Team 2. Judges.
Hi guys, this is Michelle Berquist from the City of Toronto. Got it. The first question for you. Thanks for this really great presentation. It was really thorough and encouraging to see you take on not just the physical accessibility of the system, but it's sort of all-encompassing accessibility of cycling as a whole via the use of bike share and the many aspects of it. So lots of things I could ask about. I'm going to zero in on something you highlighted in your presentation and that caught my eye in your report about the financial accessibility of the bike share, and you talked about having affordable passes or short-term passes as a way to make trying the system accessible and make cash flowing the commitment easier, so you're not having to make a whole year commitment at a time. You went on to acknowledge that Bike Share Toronto has today a kind of one ride fare or a 24-hour fare or 72-hour fare. So I wondered whether you were able to get any data about whether those options in Toronto are working today for the things you hoped they would in terms of trials or cash flowing, or if not, what are some of the barriers to using those options today in Toronto, and how could they be made even more accessible?
Yeah, so I think for sure, short-term passes are really useful for people to get to try out something for a day or 2 days. But I think if you're someone that's interested in regularly making use of bike share but don't have $100 to commit to an annual pass, spending $15 say for a 3-day pass, and then even to do it for a week, that's like $30 just to try for a week the system. And so I think that's a barrier right there. So while they do provide the opportunity to try for a really short period of time, something like a month-long pass is what really enables people to use the system regularly without it being that big upfront cost of an annual pass.
Great. Thanks. Sounds like there's a lot to unpack there, and that's just you know, the lowest hanging fruit. Much appreciated.
All right, I've got another question. So I thought you guys did a great job of identifying some of the barriers that are faced by expanding bike share into a suburban area. And I'm curious as to, in your research, whether you found examples of bike share in other suburban areas, I guess like at scale. And if so, what are some of the lessons that you may have learned from that? And if not, what is it about Scarborough that, you know, makes it a winning, a going concern for bike share?
Yeah, so I think an example I would give is the Capital bike share system in Washington, DC. I think it's one of the larger ones, and they have expanded into several of their suburbs. I think generally those are never the most frequently used stations. They're never the most successful, depending if you're defending success in terms of how frequently they're used and how much income they bring into the system. But I think we try to really look at a definition of success as, you know, ensuring accessibility to people and ensuring that it doesn't matter where you live, but that you have, you know, you have the opportunity to have a variety of transportation options to you. And so I think what we learned is that a system can't just look at what's going to be the most profitable in order to make the decisions about where to expand, but the system really has to focus on a variety of factors when making those kinds of decisions. And so I think Scarborough, you know, we had a number of factors that we looked at that we thought it would be a more successful area within the suburbs, kind of a good place to start. But certainly we don't expect that an expansion there would have as much ridership as downtown. But we do think that over time, with a lot of community engagement, that it has the potential to really be well used.
And even in terms of Scarborough, I would like to add something on it. Like if you compare to North American cities, so they have a very strong downtown, and then they have suburbs. And if we see the context of Toronto, it's kind of really unique because we do have a whole GTA area with main Toronto downtown, but Scarborough, Etobicoke, North York, they all serve as an individual downtown core also. So that adds a scope where Scarborough is kind of, it has a proximity to downtown core. So it's not like too far, and that can expand as a new transportation hub, as a new downtown. Similarly, that can be applied to North York, that can be applied to Etobicoke, or it can be applied to Mississauga. So yeah, that's unique specifically for Toronto.
And the last thing to add was what we really found interesting through our interviews with the professionals was how educating regarding bike share is important, because one of our interviews told us that even with the presence of e-bikes, people actually think that they have to pay more for e-bikes. So that kind of stops them from using such an option for, especially in the suburban areas where the distance was a lot. So I think that's one thing that we have seen as an important factor also.
Great, thanks so much.
My compliments, great presentation. And I think using Scarborough Center, Scarborough Town Center as a downtown hub makes a lot of sense to me. My question is, why did your team select bike share as your topic, your focus of your research?
Primarily because it's already existing, and it's easy to expand something that's already there. And our basic idea was how can we promote an infrastructure, and it's better than expanding something that's already there than building something from the scratch. That was our main idea. I don't know if Pooja and Amy have to add anything to this.
Yeah, and when this this competition came across, and we all were in a COVID situation, and the one thing we were noticing were there were bicyclists everywhere, and then there was major change on the bicycle infrastructure in downtown. Like Lakeshore was converted, and then there was Active 2 program. So that was some of the thing that got our attention. And when we learned about okay, there is this biking infrastructure, and then we have a bike share Toronto, which is an existing infrastructure. So let's work on that. So yeah, that's the story behind it.
And I would add, just on a really personal note, I did a project for a class last semester and was looking at, or read some papers about distribution of stations in cities kind of across Canada, and where they were located kind of from an equity perspective. And I was really interested to see that in Toronto, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was about 25% of stations are in the lower 2 quintiles of advantage. If you kind of separate out dissemination areas into quintiles by how advantaged they are. Only 25% of stations were in the bottom 2 quintiles, and over 50% of stations were in the top 2 quintiles. And so it was just a really stark example of how much inequity there is in that system. And so this seems like a really good opportunity to look at how the system could be made more equitable.
Thank you so much, team number 2.
Thank you.
Very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. So I would like to introduce team number 3. Their topic, Sense and Scalability, Upscaling Neighborhood Solutions to Citywide Problems. Please help me in introducing David, Lewis, and Michelle. A special thanks to their mentors, Heidi and Raphael. Their topic is centered on creating system resiliency by building community engagement. They propose a 2-step solution, adapts to meet COVID-related challenges in the short term, and construct a cross-jurisdictional framework to handle challenges in the long term. So I'll hand over the screen to David.
All right. Good evening. So we're going to start with a brief overview of our report, and then we'll go into our solution. To begin, this is a little bit of context of some existing structures at the City of Toronto. First is neighborhood improvement areas, which we heard about earlier. These are areas that fall under the lowest percentile in certain metrics and are thus eligible for more city support and funding. The next is neighborhood planning tables. These are existing tables, about 140 of them, that connect community activists and NGOs to the city. Now, we noted in our research that the communities with the most active organizations were the ones that tended to have the strongest links to the city. And in the right, you can see some information on transit usage at the height of the spring pandemic. You'll notice that the areas of the city that are the most heavily trafficked, even at the height of the pandemic, are those that tend to correspond with the neighborhood improvement areas. So the poorer areas of the city. So this leads to what we believe the problem is. Transit networks, well, whether fixed or buses, tend to be unresponsive to massive changes in the context of the system, like COVID. Secondly, certain communities, as we saw earlier, tend to be underserved, not only by transit, but other resources. Finally, we noticed in our research that there were silos within government that prevented information sharing that could have helped correspond and lead to better integrated responses to problems like COVID. Our research process went through many areas. We conducted many interviews, and we had 3 main methods for doing so. But what we really wanted to make clear throughout the entirety of our research process was that community and community engagement should be at the core of any transit outreach. After all, transit exists to serve communities, not the other way around. Now, 3 key existing tools that we use to base our solution are Decidem, which is a Spanish direct democracy, digital democracy platform that has 4 main functions. It allows for consultation between citizens and their government on existing proposals and projects. It allows for citizens to propose projects for their neighborhoods and communities. It allows people to track proposals either from the city or from other people, and it allows people to participate in all stages of the planning process. Second, Remix, which is an isochronal mapping system that allows transit planners to overlay demographics, transit data onto one map and makes the planning process a lot simpler, as well as a lot clearer. It also has components that allow for the sharing of data and visualization with the public. Finally, a tool we used was TOWIE, which is built by Conveyo. TOWIE is an open source tool that is primarily used by cities for consultation, and it works at multiple scales, whether it's a small neighborhood planning system or whether it's an entire regional network. TOWIE can be used for analysis, much like Remix, on an isochronal scale as well. Now, all of these tools fed into what we believe a perfect solution for problems like COVID and underserved communities in general in transit could look like. And that solution is ACE.
Thank you, David. I'd like to introduce ACE, better integrating community engagement and a medley of digital and traditional tools into transit planning to build resilience in the system for decades to come. ACE is a cloud-based tool designed to empower communities in transit decision-making by leveraging and integrating both digital and traditional tools, and it will have both an outward and an inward face. So the outward face is essentially a powerful data visualization tool that can be used to supplement and be part of the consultation process. It will allow for immersive and rapid two-way feedback cycles to be created between the public and decision makers. Inspired by Decidem's, users will be able to provide direct and iterative feedback to projects. And input methods will include things like geotagging, AR tagging, discussion forums like Decidem, passive location data collection, and facilitated consultations, which is inspired by TOWIE. And of course, all data collected would be anonymized. The second outward-facing function of ACE is a public alert system, which would collect real-time load data from various local operators and APIs and distribute it back to the public through a mobile app which can be downloaded, as well as community dashboards, which exist within the community and are accessible to the public. Users with the mobile app can also report system, and local transit operators can also report system disruptions and schedule changes. ACE's inward-facing function then focuses on bringing decision makers together to collaboratively build consensus and dialogue, and is very much inspired by our research with Remix. All the information collected from the outward-facing function plus open data sets provided by the government can be indexed to layers on the map of the city or the network as a whole. Searchable demographic and population data can also be toggled and added onto the map. This system would allow planners to engage directly with residents and other departments and agencies involved to break down silos. So then how would this all be implemented? We are envisioning that all the data would be collected from the public through ACE's website and app, physical kiosk locations, mail-in fax, phone, and in-person facilitated conversations. And this kind of allows for an equitable and inclusive outreach. Data collected to ACE will then be shared to multiple levels of government and all sorts of transit planning agencies. All these teams and departments can access this shared foundation on which to make decisions. And we're thinking that this could be developed, operated, and maintained by a third-party operator. And at the end of the day, the more people who use ACE, the more powerful and effective it will be. So now I turn it over to Lewis to talk more about how that would work.
Thank you, Michelle. So the feedback loop of community engagement combines all of our findings into different levels and approaches in order to establish a relationship amongst them. Generally, the feedback loop appears linear. However, projects could jump ahead or circle back to an earlier stage. We have segregated all the phases into two general categories. There's traditional, which is in the outer middle ring, and digital low tech, which is in the inner middle ring. I'll be covering ACE's relationship with the feedback loop in this section. The first phase is building awareness. Maintaining a wide and thorough outreach is crucial as it increases the amount of people that can participate in the decision-making process. One of the priorities reflected in the feedback loop is to create spaces for conversations. However, traditional spaces for conversations have been ineffective even before COVID. By making a variety of avenues available, community engagement can still happen during the age of COVID and beyond. When it comes to processing feedback, the tools available will determine what kind of questions can be asked as well as the audience. More tools allows for more high-quality data from a larger sample pool. Archiving is key to help de-silo city processes. By making historical and current data readily available, it reduces redundancy and builds awareness amongst different stakeholders and decision makers. Through each stage, more information is built up in order to help a variety of actors propose transit solutions. Depending on the tools that are available, the complexity and time it would take to develop a solution changes dramatically. The next phase is achieved when a solution has been developed and deemed viable. It is important to present the solution to the public for further feedback and voting. It is important to note that there is a life to a project, especially since urban spaces are highly dynamic. So as time marches on, the need for adjustments will become necessary. So let's see how ACE fits into this model. ACE allows any actor to raise proposals or issues, such as concerns over transit accessibility and commute times that have been exacerbated by COVID. By working with community groups and employing a variety of methods, problems can be safely escalated and promoted through ACE at the discretion of the residents. Stakeholders can view these issues on the neighborhood dashboard, while other residents can discover them through building flyers, radio, or the map or the web app. Once an issue has been posted, residents and stakeholders can leave long response comments and feedback through phone calls, chat forums, or even mail-in comments. ACE will archive and install all this information in order for residents to track the progress of a project, but also for different stakeholders to see what is happening in the neighborhood. When a petition gains the target audience's endorsement, a solution can be proposed by any stakeholder. In this case, a transit agency could propose a pilot project that includes fare subsidies. ACE will employ powerful digital mapping tools in order to rapidly model and test for the viability of a suggestion, while allowing for two-way conversations throughout the entire process. If a few solutions are deemed viable, ACE will give community members the ability to vote and give feedback on the idea that they like. During implementation, if any changes become necessary, ACE gives planners the flexibility to make amendments and will alert not only residents, but other agencies and projects operating in the vicinity. Finally, the feedback loop in ACE are not limited to transportation planning. For example, it can be adapted to help frame development or large-scale infrastructure projects. It can also be applied to local problems by allowing community members to voice concerns to decision makers. As there is no one-size-fits-all solution, we employed an arsenal of tools that work in tandem and complement the existing systems in place. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of questions. ACE seems to be a planning-focused tool. So in the middle of a pandemic or major disruption, how would you use ACE to meet the travel needs of essential workers, and especially those workers who don't have access to digital technology?
Thank you for your
I could
question.
speak to that.
Oh, okay.
Okay, sorry about that. So the idea of ACE was, if we created a common platform that is that uses a common format, it allows for people to, let's say, if a community did not have access to the internet, they could still go to, let's say, a pop-up space, or they can look at a flyer, and they can still get the information that they need. That's why we're also looking into other low-tech technologies, such as radio, because those are still readily used by some communities, as well as looking into nonprofit organizations or community spaces where there could be internet available in these spaces. So it's still available for people to go to. We also, that's part of the traditional approach that we're also looking into, which basically allows people to send, for example, mail-in comments if they want, so they can still engage with the platform, but it doesn't have to be through digital means.
I'd also like to jump in and add that while a lot of these elements do work very well in the long term and help build system resilience, by having these direct processes, we can implement it right away, and then community members can speak directly to operators who are running the bus routes, in charge of determining these kinds of short-term changes. And we can quickly gauge the needs of these communities. So if we can reach them quickly, then we can start acting quickly.
Okay, thank you. And just a second question. There must be a big universe of digital tools out there. Why did you pick the ones you picked as your model to create ACE?
Well, that's a great question. When it came to our research, we wanted to maintain our focus mainly on existing tools that prioritized either community engagement or real community focus. And that's why we gravitated towards tools like Decidim, which are widely used across Europe. There's a massive Decidim presence in places like Barcelona and Belgium. But also, that's why we gravitated towards tools like Remix. Now, what makes Remix a really useful tool is that it allows you to look on a micro level at individual neighborhoods, much like TAWI does, but also it allows you to place transit within a social context, overlaying census data about neighborhood poverty, equity lenses, so that you can get a real focus, not only for what transit means from a systems perspective, but from an individual perspective as well. And I think that's why we had that as our guiding focus, and that's why we ended up with those three tools I mentioned earlier as our main base for creating ACE.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass it on to my co-judges.
All right, I'll take a kick at the can. This is Michelle. My mind is just spinning as you're talking about this tool, that it's something that could solve just hundreds of different problems. And you sort of introduced us to the link of how this confronts a COVID transit problem. But I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on what are the ways you see a tool like this sort of confronting the different phases of COVID response and recovery.
So for Okay, in the short term, we were thinking that ACE would, as Michelle mentioned, it could definitely help out a lot faster. But in terms of a long-term recovery, the idea is we want to get into a habit of introducing new ways of engaging with people. And we don't want to just do one simple town hall meeting that's at 9 p.m. in a gym, but we want to see if there's more ways that we can engage more people. So that's why digital technologies or using the power of technology in the future would allow us to still have sort of these town hall meetings, but it gives people time to also send their replies back. We can integrate other technologies, so we can get translation services or accessibility. It can definitely be more focused. And in terms of COVID for the long term, when we start focusing on other parts like this, like we can start bringing in more technologies such as like kiosks and open spaces. So we can also utilize spaces that might not be used that much right now. So for example, like having kiosks in community centers, we can social distance them and people can still interact with them even if they don't have access to the internet.
Thank you. Brilliant. I think David might have a question. I saw your video come on.
I do. I was just struggling to unmute myself there. So I think you guys have done a really good job of justifying why it's a good idea to build these different functions into ACE. So you've got your inward-facing stuff, your outward-facing stuff, and there's various functions within that. Can you quickly speak about some of the risks or the challenges associated with bringing those various functions into one platform?
Absolutely, thank you. One of the major challenges that we kind of came across, even while just conceptualizing this, was the fact that it would be so hard, it's very, very difficult to equitably reach all corners of kind of the public, of the community. And when we were talking with our interviewees and doing our research, we came across a lot of frustration and trouble in kind of voicing community problems and issues and grievances, and having them be acted upon by the city. And that's how we kind of came up with our idea of breaking down government silos and really taking the community feedback and listening to it and hearing it and digesting it. And of course, that's not to say that once we implement ACE, that all of these problems would go away. There would still need to be a very concerted effort between transit planners, different levels of planning, different levels of government to kind of sit down and really go through this data and look at it and have conversations and discussions. And we also stress that this process is incredibly iterative. It needs to be constantly, we need to constantly draw new people, new voices into the dialogue. We need to constantly kind of show that results are possible using this model so that people will feel kind of like they have a stake in participating and that this is an effective way to voice concerns. And so of course there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done in maintaining this. But we hope that once this cycle does get off the ground, that the momentum will carry forward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, David, Lewis, and Michelle. And of course, I encourage everyone to use the chat if you have any comments for the team. Okay. So I would like to propose or present our next team, Team Ford, towards a resilient airport implementing COVID-19 testing at Pearson Airport. Yash, Michael, and Andrew are the team members. Special thanks to Ben and Onkar who mentored the team. Their research aims to examine safety challenges of passenger terminal operations at Pearson Airport during COVID-19, identifying bottleneck areas and room for improvement, and propose solutions to enhance the safety of airport travelers and staff members during the pandemic. So I'll hand over the screen to Andrew.
Great, and thank you to all the teams for being very on time so far. For this next presentation, you have until 6:20. Please go ahead.
Hello everyone, my name is Michael and I'm presenting today with my group mates, Andrew and Yash, on the topic of building a pandemic resilient airport. Our focus is on implementing COVID-19 testing centers at Pearson Airport. Andrew? There is a crisis in the aviation industry. As you can see in the pictures, many airplanes are grounded since the pandemic hit. Border closure, travel restrictions, and fear to travel has resulted in sharp decline in passenger volumes. Airports are also seriously impacted. At Pearson International Airport, passenger volume has decreased by over 90% year on year. In our research, we aim to address the question of how can we induce a faster recovery in the aviation industry while ensuring a healthy and safety travel environment for travelers and aviation workers. There are three objectives of our research. We aim to identify current safety measures implemented by airports around the world. The second objective is to analyze the possibility of implementing COVID-19 testing stations. Our third objective is to provide recommendations on the implementation of COVID-19 testing at Pearson Airport. In our research, we interviewed 4 industry professionals for their insights on the current impact, future recovery, and the current measures taken at Pearson Airport. We also conducted a literature and media scan of the practices adopted by 50 other airports. To test the possibility of COVID-19 testing at Pearson, we first used time series regression models to forecast future recovery. Then we used MMC queuing model to estimate the amount of space and time required to process the current capacity, as well as future passenger volumes. To begin with, we did a media scan of 50 largest airports in the world. We identified the most commonly adopted measures, and we summarized them into 4 lines of defense. The first line of defense is the usage of personal protective equipment. Pearson adopted a mandatory mask requirement in early June. The second line is social distancing. Many airports put up signs and floor markings to ensure physical distancing. Same goes with Pearson Airport. The third line is enhanced cleaning. As you can see in the pictures, Pearson introduced high-tech cleaning strategies and self-service baggage drop-off. For example, you can see the self-cleaning machine roaming the floors of Terminal 1 and Terminal 3 at Pearson Airport. The fourth line of defense is COVID-19 testing. However, currently it's now widely implemented by airports around the world. Pearson also did not implement COVID-19 testing at the time of our study, but a pilot study was carried out as we were finalizing our paper. The International Air Transportation Association, IATA, found COVID-19 testing at airports made 41% of its survey respondents feel a lot safer to fly. Many aviation associations and countries have called for testing to replace 14-day quarantine policy. Many airports also use PCR testing, which takes a swab of samples from nose and throat, and tests are usually targeted toward arrival passengers from high-risk nations rather than universal testing. That means the program has potential for expansion. IATA also set out 3 guidelines for implementing COVID-19 testing stations. The testing should be rapid, meaning the results should be generated within 60 minutes of testing. The scale should be large enough to conduct several hundred tests per hour. And lastly, the accuracy should be high, meaning less than 1% of false negative or false positive. Next, we'll explore how to implement COVID testing that meets the IATA requirement.
In order to know the capacity of COVID testing station at airport, it was important for us to determine that what would be the actual number of passengers that would be tested. Therefore, we started our analysis by forecasting the future volume for year 2020. As you can see the graph, because of pandemic, passenger volume reduced drastically from February, causing reduction in ridership by almost 98% as compared to last year. In order to forecast the passenger volume, we did multiple iterations to get good R-square value. We considered the base time period from April 2020 as the passenger volume started to rise from this month and performed the linear regression. We found that there would be almost rise by 45% in passenger volume in month of December 2020 as compared to the current volume. Our next task was to know the functionality and serviceability of COVID testing station. We came up with the general layout of COVID testing, as can be seen on the right-hand side. The process consisted of 3 steps. First one being passenger arriving at the terminal and waiting to be tested at different servers. Second, waiting for the test result in waiting area. And last, leaving for the destination or quarantine station depending on test results. We use the MMC queuing model to understand the lining up at testing station. This model allowed us to predict the estimated wait time and number of passengers in the queue. To run this model, we required the following inputs. First, the arrival rate of passenger per hour entering the terminal. Second, the service rate provided by each server to the passenger. And last, the number of servers at the testing station. In order to see the efficiency of COVID testing station, we modeled it in two different scenarios. The first scenario was for the current international passenger volume, and second one being for the rise in passenger volume by 45% at the end of year 2020. For scenario one, we used the arrival rate as 750 passenger per hour. Second input was mean service rate, which was 45 passenger per hour, since we consider 1.5 minutes for each passenger to complete the sampling. And lastly, we determined the minimum number of servers and made sure that it satisfies the condition of steady state. For scenario two, we increased the arrival rate of passengers by 45%. Finally, we got the following results. That is average number of passengers in the queue and the whole system, which varies between 50 to 60 for both scenarios. Using the queue formation, we were able to calculate the area required for COVID testing by using the IATA guidelines of minimum passenger space that we need to provide at check-in counters. And we also considered extra space for social distancing. The other output we got was waiting time for passengers who would be standing in the queue. This was important as it helped us in determining the expected wait time that we need to inform the passenger in advance who will be going through COVID testing. The results of wait time were less than 5 minutes, which is also acceptable under the IATA guidelines of providing minimum level of service at airport terminals. Finally, this is a comparison for two different scenarios with various parameters like test capacity and space required for COVID testing station. We also identified and made sure that enough space is available at Terminal 1 using GIS. In summary, for implementing a COVID testing station, we would require at least 3,000 square meter space, minimum 25 number of servers, and passengers needs about 68 minutes in total to get their result in hand.
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself. Sorry for the technical issues. Thank you, Michael and Yas, for introducing our project and also talking about our technical results. Now I would like to go through our specific recommendations for how this testing station at Pearson is going to be implemented. So we divide our recommendations into three categories, and the first one is space. We calculated that we need at least 3,000 square meters in total for the testing station. So we analyzed the existing space in Terminal 1 and Terminal 3 of Pearson Airport, and we determined that it's best to place the testing station in the arrival stall of Terminal 1. And we focused testing on international travelers, which has been the case at other airports. So that means that these travelers will go through immigration and customs, they will pick up their baggage, and then they will enter the testing station. Now, this location is also in line with the recently completed testing trial at Pearson, which was also in the arrivals hall of Terminal 1. Looking at capacity, we have a capacity of conducting up to 20,000 tests per day using 25 technicians / testing machines, and this capacity is sufficient for our expected passenger volume. Now, we recognize that some rapid testing devices have been approved by Health Canada over the past 2 months. However, since they have a lower accuracy rate, in order to not compromise public health, we do not recommend using these rapid devices. We recommend sticking with PCR testing. So now let's take a look at our post-testing procedure, which answers the now what question. So we recommend that people who receive negative results should be allowed to move freely or leave the airport freely, which matches our goal of using this testing program to replace a blanket quarantine policy. And we see that similar practices have been implemented at other places. For example, Singapore recently set up a travel bubble with China and Australia. And so people who arrive from these places, they get tested at Singapore airport. If they test negative, then they are allowed to move around Singapore freely, which shows that the Singapore authorities believe this would not compromise public health. But in terms of public health, for those who test positive, we still suggest that they should be quarantined for 14 days. And we suggest this to happen at a centralized facility if possible, but if not, we can always go forward with how people are currently quarantined in Canada at the moment. So to summarize the significance of our project, the testing program aimed to improve the resiliency at Pearson Airport by allowing passenger demand to recover fastly and safely. And this is the only way that we can improve the operational viability at Pearson Airport, because we see that a lot of airports, including Pearson, are having their operational viability at stake if passenger demand cannot recover soon. And this recovery is safe for not just the travelers, but also importantly for the employees. Now, these are the essential workers who may be in contact, who are in contact with travelers on a daily basis. So from an equity perspective, it's important that we let these essential workers know that their health is protected and that we can inform them if they come into contact with people who test positive. So this has public health benefits, but also economic benefits to the community, because Pearson is, after all, the second largest employment hub in Toronto. However, there has been massive rounds of job cuts at Pearson recently. So we have to allow passenger volume to recover quickly and safely so that Pearson can continue to act as an economic engine for the GTA. So that's the end of our presentation. Thanks for listening. We would also like to acknowledge UTTAN for setting up this presentation, our mentors for providing us with feedback, and our interviewees for providing us with industry knowledge.
All right, thanks so much to the three of you. So I think I was really interested in the technical analysis that you did and that you brought to this problem. One thing that came to mind is that it's very precise, but COVID has introduced this extreme uncertainty that is not usually the case when we're dealing with a near-term problem. So my question to you guys is, how would you propose to test the sensitivity of your recommendations for how you'd be setting up these testing facilities to account for that uncertainty?
First of all, thank you for the question. I would like to begin with acknowledging that even though COVID is bringing us a lot of uncertainties and we do not know what will happen, let's say in a couple of months, we still believe that it's important to have precise calculations as a foundation, as a solid bedrock. And these calculations can always be scaled or modified in order to suit how our circumstances are changing. But it's always important in my belief that we have these calculations and the equations in place before we can kind of modify them according to the situation. And then I'll allow my teammates to speak more on this.
Yes, and in our report, we also address potential changes, because we understand sometimes second waves can hit, and then there might be a shortage of testing available for airports. So for example, in Amsterdam, in Netherlands, they're facing a second wave right now, and then the airport is facing a shortage of testing. So they went back to the very beginning, went back to 14-day quarantine. But before that, they went back to selective countries for testing. So instead of universal testing, they went from universal to selective countries, like high-risk nations, and then go back to 14-day once they can no longer secure test samples. So we do offer other backup plans. And we do have to recognize that COVID testing implementation at airports are involving many different levels of government. Like the local government would be the local government regulations, and the federal government would be how they deal with international relations, like which country to be identified as the high-risk nations, and how are we going to deal with the passenger from these countries. So this also offers different flexibility in terms of forecasting to the future.
Okay, thank you so much.
I can jump in.
Oh, sure, go for it, Tyrone.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. The focus of your research was on arrivals for the international terminal. Just wondering why your team did not look at departures if we're trying to maintain Pearson as a global hub. So interested in your reasoning there.
So thank you for your question. I have two quick thoughts on this, and I'll allow my teammates to add afterwards. We had our interviewees included staff at the Greater Toronto Airport Authority, and through our interviews, we know that at Pearson they are more focused on testing arrival passengers rather than departing passengers. So our solution matches with the current focus at Pearson Airport in a practical sense. And also, we've examined a lot of airports that have already implemented COVID testing in the world, including Canada. A couple of airports are currently in the middle of implementing testing trials, and all these trials are focused on arrival passengers. And the second thought that I would like to bring up is that we're offering a model for how testing can be implemented at Pearson. Even though we focus on arrivals, if further research determines that departure testing could be more effective or needed, then we can always, it's like a flexible model that can be modified for departure testing as well.
And just to add on to Andrew's comments, we look at 50 airports, and 19 of the 50 airports implement COVID testing. At the time of our study, I think more are implementing on the way. And 18 of the 19 airports put, 19 airports all put their a COVID testing center at the arrival level. Only about 2 airports put COVID testing at the departure level. I think that's also in some sense reflecting there's inconsistency between testing from different countries, and then offering testing at the arrival level, at the arrival section, can provide like a consistent testing for a country's requirement. So that ensures we don't like intake unequal testing, because some testing facilities do not offer high quality testing, and some facilities offer very high quality testing. So they just want to be consistent.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So just wondering if we should answer Ahmed's question in the group chat.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm looking to the event organizers if I can forego my question for the audience question if you'd like.
Certainly.
Okay, so thank you, Ahmed, for asking your questions. First, I would like to answer a question about departing testing, which has the potential of eliminating the need of quarantine facilities. So in our answer to Mr. Tyrone, we touched upon the possibility of scaling our testing implementation to focus on departure testing as well. But on the other hand, an issue that we identified with departure testing is that in the event that there is delay in getting out testing results, then this may cause passengers to miss their flight, or like it's hard to determine how much advance you need to arrive at the airport, and that may cause more disruptions to the airport compared with arrival testings when you're already at your destination airport. And on the other hand, we don't necessarily want to send people back to their, like we want to encourage traveling. So even if people test positive, then they may still be able to travel after the quarantine. And also this quarantine is kind of decided at the federal level in consultation with the airport authorities. And I'll let my teammate answer your other question.
Sure. So for the first question, the 3,000 square meter testing area seems feasible, yes. And that also depends on the site, the floor plans of the airport terminal. So for example, we look at Pearson Airport, there's Terminal 1 and Terminal 3. And then we look at Terminal 1, and then the area for seating and for waiting for COVID testing is wide enough and big enough for putting all these facilities inside. But in Terminal 3, the like arrival hall is actually a very long and narrow space, considering you have to let people also like check in or even wait for taxis. That become not very feasible to put all these facilities inside. And also it has to be related to the number of samples, COVID testing kits that the country can provide itself. For example, in the United States, they're currently just fighting just to get the local cases done. They don't have extra resources to be allocated to airports. And a lot of the airports that we look at, the top 50, a lot of them are from the United States. So that's also another reason why it's not very widely implemented in the world top 50 airports.
Just quickly add on to that, now we're seeing Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, and even airports in Atlantic Canada, that was from news from a day ago, they're talking about the possibilities of implementing testing at the airports. So I think this really goes to show the urgency and the effectiveness that airport authorities have placed on testing as a potential way to encourage or stimulate travel. And even in the Singapore example I brought up, that it established a travel bubble with China and Australia, and most recently Hong Kong, the testing was immediately on the table. And I think cost may be an issue in here, but our report identifies some recommendations in terms of cost. For example, the Singapore-Hong Kong travel bubble, the testing the cost is borne by the travelers themselves, whereas some other areas like Europe, the government provides funding for the testing. So I think there's a lot of flexibility in there and how this can be approached.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Team 4, Andrew, Michael, and Yash.
Sorry, Michelle, if you have questions, you can put it in the chat. I can address it over the chat. Thank you.
All right. So on to Team 5. The topic of Team 5's focus was a framework for integrating on-demand transit into urban transit networks during disruption scenarios. The team consists of Simon, Nikki, Colin, and Omar. Special thanks to the mentors, Sana and Antonio. On-demand transit could provide flexibility for a transit system experiencing a wide range of demand due to COVID-19. The team study reviews ODT in Canada and develops an emergency ODT implementation framework that could be used in times of crisis to ensure safe and accessible access to transit. So I'm going to hand over my screen to Simon.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for the introduction. I believe I'm sharing my screen now. I hope so, and I hope everyone can hear me okay.
Yep.
So thank you for joining. My name's Simon, here with my team, Omar, Colin, and Nikki. And as we just introduced, we're going to talk about a framework for integrating on-demand transit into urban transit networks during disruption scenarios. So we're first going to talk about introducing on-demand transit and the potential benefits and opportunities. We'll walk through the framework that we developed and apply it to the Toronto case, highlight some key considerations for customizing the system, and close with our conclusions and recommendations. So on-demand transit has been proven to solve or help resolve system inefficiencies and quality challenges during normal operations, typically in low-density applications. The opportunity we identified was the lack of research, given the recency of the pandemic, into how on-demand transit, or ODT, can be applied outside these traditional use cases and help agencies across the board address the challenges they're facing that have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll now flip it over to my colleague, Nikki, who will take us through some background information on on-demand transit.
Okay, thank you so much, Simon. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I'm not sure, but I'll take that as a yeah. So thank you so much, I appreciate that. Most of you already may be aware of what on-demand transit is and the overall function, but I'll just provide a quick overview for those that might be slightly unfamiliar. So on-demand transit is a service characterized by flexible routing and scheduling determined by passenger demand, and has the potential to simultaneously assist transit agencies in improving connectivity while decreasing congestion. So that's pretty important right now, given the current context of the pandemic. So on-demand transit services allow customers to request a ride on demand, typically via smartphone or app. So it can be on the phone if you have a call center, depending on what the municipality or agency chooses. And further, operators often provide for trips with vehicles that are dynamically routed rather than following a fixed route system, and are often dynamically scheduled. So on the next slide, I'll be talking about benefits of on-demand transit. So the benefits of implementing the service can supplement traditional fixed route services, particularly in low density areas, as was briefly mentioned prior, and they have been well documented within academic literature. So these often relate to benefits of flexibility, improved cost efficiency, and optimization of vehicle deployment, improved rider quality as there was increased predictability and connectivity of the service. So this helps with first and last mile solutions, as well as reduced environmental impact if there's a decrease of single occupancy vehicle trips. So further, I'll be speaking about some of the findings from our 16 interviews that we have with key informants from the industry. So following comprehensive literature review of academic literature, we completed these interviews, and this was primarily done to gain a deeper understanding of ODT during disruption scenario in the current context of the pandemic, and apply our learnings to the case study to effectively see the practicality of implementing on-demand transit into a denser urban area. So the key informants we interviewed echoed several similarities with what we learned in the academic literature. However, they did touch upon the ways in which the pilots were able to effectively attract new riders due to increased convenience and allowed increased safety for riders during the COVID-19 pandemic. So there's allowability of contact tracing through the app, as well as ability to allow for physical distancing on the actual transit system. So next, I'll be passing along to Omar, who will be speaking briefly about the framework and case study portion of our research project. So off to you, Omar.
Thanks, Nikki. So in terms of framework, to implement on-demand transit, we have three steps in our framework. The first is to determine the input, which is the parameters that affect the applicability of on-demand transit. And then we need to identify areas that are best suited for on-demand transit, especially during a disruption, by analyzing data spatially. And the third component is system customization, where we need to select operational parameters to tailor the system based on the area needs and the system's needs. On the next slide, we'll be covering in more detail the framework input, and the table shows the parameters. There are two kinds of parameters. The first ones fall under the primary criteria, and the second fall under secondary criteria. Primary criteria are qualifying parameters, where an area must satisfy this requirement to be eligible for on-demand transit, whereas secondary criteria are there to assist us identify the best area for on-demand transit. So our primary criteria corresponds to population density, and we use a literature value which we modify based on the drop in ridership. And this is because the current densities are generating fewer trips due to the pandemic. As for secondary criteria, we list them here in their decreasing order of importance, starting with the percentage of low-income households. Then we look at the percentage of workers in essential services. And this means people who work in utilities, waste management, healthcare, construction, manufacturing, warehousing, and retail, trade, and education. Then we look at the headways, or the time between consecutive vehicles, and this is an indicator of the quality of service. Afterwards, we look at the percentage of people who take transit to work, and the last parameter is the change in offered service during the pandemic, and for that, we look at the percentage change in the service headway before and during the pandemic. Next up, Colin's going to walk us over the application of this framework on the case study in the city of Toronto.
Yeah, thanks, Omar. So like you said, I'm going to go over the application of the framework for neighborhoods within the city of Toronto. And that's using census data that was gathered from the Toronto Open Data Portal, and also transit data that was gathered from the TTC. So first, starting with the primary criteria of population density, and using the equation that we outlined in the previous slide there, we've set the critical low density to be 3,500 people per kilometer squared. So from this, you can see that there's 33 potential ODT candidates, candidate neighborhoods, which can then move on to the secondary criteria. So next, looking at household income, we've chosen a low income measure from the census data and taken the median amongst all of the neighborhoods as the cutoff point. So that would be the neighborhoods here in this map that fall within the two darkest shades of green there. And that leaves us with 11 candidate neighborhoods going on to the next step, which is essential workers. And here we're doing the exact same thing, taking the median value amongst the neighborhoods as the cutoff. And through this process, we are left with 5 candidate neighborhoods. For the next criteria, headway, we can see here that through some recent TTC data, there's a number of routes with headways over 20 minutes, which are the dark green shade. And from this, 3 of the candidate neighborhoods carry forward. And in this check, we're seeing 3 of the neighborhoods do in fact have at least a moderate level of transit commuters or transit dependency, keeping them as appropriate candidates for the next step, which is finally the just another level of confirmation. We can see that compared to 2019, there's many routes that have had increases in headway this year. And these routes do indeed pass through the candidate neighborhoods, which are outlined in red.
So in summary from this process, starting off with the 140 Toronto neighborhoods, we can see that based on the framework and the particular thresholds that we assigned here, we have 3 potential ODT candidate neighborhoods, which through our framework were proven to have the elements of our framework: low population density, low income, high percentage of essential workers, transit routes with poor service offerings, which were likely worsened under the current COVID-19 scenario, and also a reliance on public transportation. So I'm going to pass it back over now to Simon.
Thanks, Colin. So the second large area that we discussed in the report is implementation considerations for customizing the service to a specific area. There are many ways to customize an on-demand transit system, and that largely depends on where it's being implemented and the needs of the community, but also the transit network that's integrating into. On the slide, we've just listed a few of these areas, which we talk about in quite a bit more detail in our report.
Thank you. You've got about 1 minute left.
Okay, great timing, because we're just getting to our last slide here. Just summarizing, what we found is that on-demand transit has been well documented in low density use cases to help agencies adapt to service inefficiencies and other challenges. What we've been able to identify is how on-demand transit can then be deployed outside these traditional use cases and developed a tool that will assist transit agencies in identifying areas best suited to meet ODT, as well as consolidated and interpreted a list of recommendations and guidelines that will assist transit agencies in customizing the system to meet their needs. Thank you for coming and listening to our presentation, and we look forward to continuing the discussion.
Bravo. It's Michelle here. I'm going to take the imperative of the first question. So thanks for this presentation. This is a topic that I know there's a lot of excitement about even before COVID, and then since about how new mobility is reacting. So I really appreciated the topic. In your presentation and especially in your paper, your position ODT is something that can both sort of safeguard access to transit for captive riders. So you talk about essential workers who are having to ride transit regardless of what's happening pandemic-wise. And you also talked a bit, and again, probably more in the paper for the benefit of the audience, about it also being something that might offer consumer confidence to choice riders, people who may be shy of the transit and looking for it. So I wanted you to expand on that idea a bit and talk about choice riders and captive riders and their reactions, and whether you've thought about fare setting in that context where you're designing a service for those two different kind of groups.
So I think I'll start off and then flip over to the rest of my team. But I think the focus on captive riders, both through essential workers and people who are taking transit to work, came on pretty early in the project, because what we were concerned about addressing was, okay, we're seeing service cuts across the board, and that's sort of been well adapted to, or a bit more adaptive as we've continued through the pandemic. But these are the people that are most vulnerable to immediate service cuts, and how do you improve system equity in a way that protects them? And I think that was sort of the driving force behind one of the reasons why ODT seems so attractive, is because it can capture that and protect the vulnerable or the most vulnerable people in this situation. I don't know if anyone else on our side, Nikki, maybe.
Yeah, I was just building on that. It was interesting to speak with the key informants, because within some of the case studies, there was focus groups that were created at the start of the pilot. So that was helpful to understand the customer experience and kind of where to build off and how to improve the actual ODT service at the beginning rather than later on down the line. So this is something that could be really helpful for transit agencies just to kind of consider in the future to ensure that they're able to either improve the service and attract more riders that might not be just doing it for essential, but rather feel more comfortable with knowing about the service, even just getting word of mouth, like how to actually market the service to different people that might not just be essential. So that was an interesting finding from one of the interviews we had. But other than that, I think it was touched upon by Simon. So if anyone else wants to add.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump in with another question. So, one of the main themes, let's call it, coming out of COVID is that the situation is very fluid. Can you walk me through how your framework might respond to that fluidity and basically the changing conditions on the ground, changing demand, changing supply, and how you would respond?
I'll just jump in first here. The good thing about on-demand transit is that it's very flexible on its own. So literally you can just go to your command center and just change a few things, and then the whole system changes accordingly. One of the things that can change rapidly is, as you said, supply and demand. And what we think of that is who needs priority access to transit right now and how can we serve them better. So, and there's been many pilots, especially in Europe, on prioritizing service, for example, for healthcare workers. So that's one of the things that we can consider in our framework and say, you know what, we're just going to prioritize service for this group of people, and then whatever else arises, we can also implement that afterwards.
Thank you.
I'll jump in with a question. On-demand transit typically has smaller vehicles. So how do you deal in a pandemic situation with users' worries about health and safety in crowded vehicles, and the obvious questions users might have compared with riding on a large bus or on the subway?
I'll take this as well. I'll just say that the benefit of having a wholly connected network system is that you can anticipate what the demand is and dispatch the right size vehicle accordingly. So if we're expecting, if there's a large request for rides, we send a 40-foot bus. And if there's just a few rides here and there, we can just dispatch small vehicles like van pools. And this facilitates physical distancing in the sense that we're able to in the sense that we're able to maintain physical distancing by sending large vehicles if required. And the other benefit is that we can also use notifications to inform the future riders of how crowded their vehicle will be, and that gives them an additional sense of security. And yeah, these are basically the two main possibilities or opportunities that are out there to make sure that we're preserving this physical distancing.
Yeah. And Omar, the only thing I would add to that, I think that's a great summary, is the ability of, since it's technology connected, the opportunities for contact tracing are just, leaps and bounds ahead of what you would have on traditional fixed route transit. So we would expect riders to feel more comfortable in that sense.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, team number 5.
Thank you.
Number team 5, Josh has a great question. So if you could respond to him in the chat, that would be great. Let me introduce our last and final presentation for tonight. Okay, so I would like to finally introduce Team 6, improving the TTC's congestion problem through a sustainability, equity, and rider experience approach. I'd like to introduce Sabrina, Jessica, Lovely, and Isabel. Special thanks to Louis and Shahan, the mentors. Their topic focuses on transit overcrowding, which has been an issue since, of course, COVID-19. The study tackles transit congestion and present recommendations for improvement through 3 lenses: equity, sustainability, and enjoyability. So I would like to hand over my screen to Jessica.
All right, thank you. Are we ready to start?
Yes.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Lovely, and today I'm joined by my teammates Sabrina and Jessica to present our research on improving the TTC's congestion problem through a sustainability, equity, and rider experience approach. When we learned about the topic of this competition, we decided to look into public transit and its issues of congestion, which is fueled by the GTA's rapidly growing population. I'm sure that we've all experienced challenges in the TTC, whether it was waiting too long for a bus, crowding onto a streetcar, or sitting in the subway that isn't moving due to an emergency or signal failure. Alongside these often unavoidable challenges, we're now faced with a new set of problems and conditions that COVID-19 has brought. So how can we meet this increasing demand and provide everyone with a safe, efficient, and reliable public transit system? Well, we've decided to focus our analysis and recommendation not just on how can we respond to COVID-19, but how can we stay resilient and operate on the longer term, or for what many may call the new normal. In this new normal, we wanted to think about how we can optimize the system and be responsive to issues of congestion so that the TTC can support Toronto's rapidly growing population and serve the day-to-day commute of millions of residents.
We used a blend of secondary and empirical research to solidify our understanding of the TTC, recognize our stakeholders, and develop a solution that's built to last. We explored academic journals, news articles, as well as TTC CEO reports and project plans. We also conducted 7 interviews with professionals within the transit field and adjusted 5 base questions depending on interviewee roles to better understand the complexities of the transit system. Our focus is on the TTC system as a whole, but it narrows in on Broadview Station to provide a detailed recommendation. We chose Broadview Station as it is a busy hub that connects many different neighborhoods, such as neighborhood improvement areas and business improvement areas, to various routes across the city. Through our interviews, many TTC employees stated that there are no current ongoing improvement initiatives at Broadview Station, and that this station is commonly overlooked, making it an ideal area of focus. To tackle the TTC's congestion problem, we took a holistic approach that analyzes the complex transit system as well as the key players within it. Our framework is broken down into 3 pillars. Sustainability, which provides a system-level perspective, allowing us to put our long-term lenses on. Equity, which provides a community-level perspective because the broader Toronto community truly matters. And rider experience, which provides a user-level perspective, making it a pleasant experience for all users.
The first thing that we looked at was sustainability. And to us, this is really about system and community resilience in the long term. So we looked at financial, operational, and environmental sustainability. And as we deep dive into the research surrounding these areas, 3 key insights really emerged that help guide our recommendation. So firstly, under pre-COVID conditions, we saw an increase in steady state demand and support for that demand. And this was reflected in an increase in government subsidies and realized operational revenue from 2018 to 2019. Secondly, there's a shift towards engineered control and automation, particularly with the automatic train control or ATC rollout. We see a push towards more efficient and tech-enabled solutions. And lastly, environmental sustainability by design is a characteristic that we see in new projects, like with hybrid and electric buses, as well as in the design of stations within the Toronto York Subway Extension project.
The second lens that was important to us was equity. We wanted to ensure that the TTC has the intention and capability to serve all of its members regardless of their needs. So during our research, 3 things became clear to us. The TTC has recently been maximizing their construction activities and accelerating efforts to meet their goal of making all stations accessible by 2025 through its Easier Access project. In regards to representation, we looked at BIAs and NIAs connected to Broadview Station to determine whether TTC is equipped to efficiently service these marginalized communities and ensure inclusion and fair representation. We see this manifest in the proposed plans to build the Ontario Line, which connects Ontario Place to the Ontario Science Centre, which would help alleviate crowding and easily connect these areas from the downtown core. From an affordability lens, we see the TTC offering riders monthly passes for frequent users to have unlimited TTC travel at lower fare rates. With the impacts of COVID-19, TTC temporarily changed their refund policy to give its customers prorated credits back on their Presto cards for March and April 2020.
The third and last approach we investigated is rider experience, which focuses on safety, cleanliness, and timeliness. We want to encourage the transition towards public transit, so it must be felt that taking the TTC is the better choice in terms of convenience and reliability. One of the TTC's project that strives at promoting safety is the Second Exit program, which creates an additional way out of the station that is both fast and accessible in order to ease congestion, limit blockages, and create a more efficient flow of rider movement. In response to the pandemic, the TTC has implemented increased sanitation and physical safety measures to ensure that all riders and employees are and feel protected. With $38 million provided by Metrolinx to improve the Presto's tap and go fare systems, the TTC has also implemented higher capacity accessible vehicles and new rapid transit lines that will minimize crowding while maximizing capacity. Ultimately, we want to ensure that a user rides the TTC from point A to point B without any interruptions. Now more than ever, our community is becoming increasingly technology enabled, and the impacts of COVID-19 have pushed traditional processes online. In a recent study by McKinsey, it was found that 75% of people using digital channels for the first time will continue to use them post-COVID. It is clear that digital is here to stay, so how can we leverage technology to address rider needs? We propose a mobile application called MyTTC to help improve the TTC's congestion problem. Right now, the well-known transit applications are owned by third parties, so MyTTC would be developed in-house and have 5 key capabilities that would serve the demands and needs of TTC riders. We recognize that not every individual has a mobile device or access to data, so we recommend launching a pilot program. This would install on-site LED screen signage at high volume bus stops along the 100 Flemington Park route, which travels through NIAs in an effort to communicate the app's capabilities. We want to recognize rider limitations and ensure that our services meet the needs and wants of all riders, because everyone and anyone should have equitable access to the TTC.
So meet our MyTTC prototype. We developed these screenshots to help you better understand what the app actually looks like. In a world that's increasingly tech-driven and mobile-driven, we feel like a proprietary app is the best scalable solution from both an operational and user experience perspective. MyTTC really brings together key functions that riders need, like improving and owning the scheduling and routing capabilities with the ability to push out delay notifications very quickly, train capacity viewing, which will help rider experience in a post-COVID world while providing real volume-based data that can be compared against Presto data, and quick in-app Presto reload to streamline the payment process. We can see here that the app has filters that help riders of all types plan their trip according to their commute needs. Under the schedule menu item is where we see the TTC's existing schedule and any service delays leveraging ATC data. On the middle screenshot, you can see how easily it could integrate with Google Maps data or a similar interface to bring familiarity and ease of use to riders. The gray button here allows you to view capacity data on the train that you're planning to board right from the screen. And on the capacity viewing screen, we show where the platform is to provide orientation, and the capacity data is shown as a percentage estimate and heat map that allows riders to make the best decisions on where to enter for their own safety. We would use LiDAR sensors, which use light pulses to sense objects and people, and without the use of cameras, we're protecting people's privacy. Startups like Blue City Technology are already using LiDAR sensors to visualize spatial data, and we can leverage those players to assist in the visualization process. So to actually get our recommendation up and running, we are proposing a 3-phased approach starting from Q4 2020 to Q4 2022. Doing it this way allows us to push out a smaller portion first, learn from the feedback and usage data of our riders, and then make adjustments in subsequent phases to improve on our recommendation. We also estimated the costs associated with our solution, particularly looking at the cost of LiDAR sensors, typical software development hours for similar apps, and weatherproof digital signage that are already in use in similar purposes. We estimate that the costs associated with the entire project to be about $200,000. And really what this tells us is that it's a worthwhile and low-cost solution that should be investigated further in a more detailed business case.
So our recommendation is focused on innovative yet feasible ways of managing crowding without any physical or infrastructure expansion. From a sustainability lens, our app would allow the TTC to compare its capacity data from LiDAR sensors with the payment data from Presto to determine hotspots for fare evasion and optimize its resources, such as where fare inspectors should be located. This app would also improve communication between the TTC and its riders. By having more information about one's commute, you can plan easily to avoid overcrowding in busy areas areas, which essentially improves connections between communities within the GTA. Next, integrating Presto Reload through mobile payment allow riders to easily recharge, reducing Presto machine lines and incentivizes them to load more. Lastly, improving the rider's overall public transit view and experience can encourage more to prefer public transit over other methods of transportation, which will lead us one step closer to meeting Toronto's goal of achieving a net zero emissions by 2050.
We hope that our presentation has given you a deeper understanding of the complexities of the TTC system, the needs of its communities, and the perspectives of its users. Going beyond, it is important that we instill confidence in our system and stay resilient during times of unpredictable stresses. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you for your presentation. I think I'm ready to buy my TTC now. And I like your recognition of the social equity issues and also the rider experience and that perspective. So I have two questions. With this solution, how will it help low-income essential workers who may not have access to digital technology? How will it help them during pandemics?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So as part of our implementation plan, we are suggesting to have a pilot project where there would be LED monitors to display capacity viewing and any informational updates that are happening within the TTC, so that if somebody is unable to access their data or just do not have access to a phone, that information is readily available for them to see. And we are targeting to have this within neighborhood improvement areas, just so they have access to that type of information.
And just to add on to that, if you're in the shoes of someone who is taking that path, imagine yourself at the station. There would be a signage that displays the data that you would normally see on the app, but this way you don't have to have a mobile device or data to use it.
Very good. And my second question is that the crowding problem has been on bus routes. So why did your team choose to focus more on a subway station?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So I think from the very beginning, we recognized that there are many different challenges and issues within public transportation. So we really wanted to focus more on congestion. And it's kind of hard to tackle TTC as a whole because of all of its multiple bus lines and stations. So we decided, just given from our background, to focus directly on Broadview Station due to the fact that it was connected to many business neighborhood improvement areas and also areas that just needed more privatization. So in that way, we wanted to look at what can we do regarding like just focusing on that specific station into how we can better the experience of those using those stations.
Thank you.
I'll ask a question, jumping in here. You did a good job sort of establishing equity, sustainability, and rider experience as these pillars of your solution. And I think it's very clear how the rider experience could be enhanced by this, and you've just spoken to the equity piece. I want to ask about sustainability. What is it about the MyTTC that would help advance the sustainability of the system, do you think?
Yeah, so one of those features is Presto Reload, and we hope to do so through a very easy in-app mobile payment system. And in doing so, we can incentivize people to, use Prestos more instead of buying individual fares.
Okay, thank you.
And to round out questions, a lot of these seem like great and intuitive ideas. Why do you think they haven't been implemented yet? What are the barriers that are holding up some things like this from being implemented in the real world?
So,
sorry, go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
I think that given that in relation to other transit systems in other cities and around the world, TTC is fairly is a young transit system. So I think it hasn't been able to kind of establish and explore more technology-enabled solutions. So I think by presenting it in this way, and given that we are entering more of like a technology-enabled and data-driven kind of future, I think it just makes sense that TTC consider these types of possibilities.
And just to add on to that, taking the flip side, it is young in a sense, but it's also quite old in the sense that the infrastructure is very set. And there's a lot of ways in which these innovative solutions might not be able to fit as easily when we look at other cities. So for example, with the automatic train control system, that is, I believe, a level 2 automation scale, whereas something like the Canada Line in Vancouver is fully automated. And so, you know, given these types of nuances, we really had to take a step back and think what type of technology solution works for Toronto, works for the riders, and can be easily implemented and leverage the different data sources that we do actually have.
All right, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Team 6.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that is the end of our presentation portion of tonight's agenda. I can say for the committee and all the colleagues on the line, congratulations to all teams. Excellent content and job well done throughout this entire process. So just again, round of applause to everyone on the line. Thank you, Michelle, for timekeeping and moderating the chat. I would like to now hand over this portion of the night to Karina from UTAN to share a few announcements and words. I would like to ask the judges to step into their special room to finalize their judging scores.
Anne-Marie, I just want to note before you jump in, Karina, I did open that breakout room up for the judges, so please join in when you get the invite.
Thanks, Anthony.
Great. I'd just like to echo everything Anne-Marie just said. Those presentations were all amazing, and the judges have a big task ahead of them. I'm just going to take a few minutes here to.
Yeah, did anybody's presentation change your mind?
I think number 1's still number 1.
Yeah, everyone just making sure the breakout room was successful. Looks like you guys are in here.
Yeah.
Kevin might jump in here and join to make sure everything's running smoothly if you have any questions. All right, good luck.
Thanks, Anthony.
Spanning planning, engineering, but also policy, economics, and business, and so much more. So it's really for that reason that we thought it would be a good idea to create the University of Toronto Transportation Alumni Committee to create a space to bring together this diverse group of professionals for just a good company, but also sharing ideas and continuing networking. In addition to bringing together a community for alumni, UTAN plans events and programs for current students to foster their interest in the transportation field and connect them with the wealth of knowledge in the University of Toronto Alumni Committee. For example, of course, the event you're at right now is one of our initiatives to connect alumni to current students. Each of the teams were paired with our very generous mentors who are professionals working in the field. And then also, of course, all of you attending tonight are a part of this network. Listening to the students' presentations is also part of being in this community. So thank you so much for coming out. I think I was, yeah. With that said, we would love for you to stay in touch. You can follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook and also sign up for a mailing list. Michelle, if you have that link available for signing up for the mailing list, I'd love for you to send that now.
Yep, it's just in the chat.
Perfect. If you don't catch it in the chat, that link is also available again on our Facebook and our LinkedIn. You can also join our executive committee for UTAN, and we actually have elections coming up, or you can be just a general member. With that said, we also wanted to take this time to say a huge thank you to Bruce Morey, the current chair of UTAN, who has been our fearless leader from the beginning, leading this committee for over 2 years. Bruce has a genuine passion for supporting and encouraging current U of T students interested in transportation, and also for building community among transportation professionals. Under his leadership, the committee has turned from just an idea to a fully functional network, accomplishing its goals of bringing people together. So once again, thank you so much, Bruce. Bruce's term as the chair is unfortunately coming to an end, and there are also a few other positions that you can see listed on the screen here that we're looking to fill. If you're interested in learning more or running for a position, please email utri@utoronto.ca, which is also listed on this slide. Or you can also register for our mailing list and you'll be notified when we initiate that process. Finally, it's so important for us to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, also listed on the screen. Without them, events with scholarships like this would not be possible. Oh, there we go. I think there's a timing to that slide. Yeah, events with scholarships wouldn't be possible without their contribution. It takes a lot of work for students to put together these reports, and we are really happy to be able to provide, okay, one moment, please. This is clearly on a timer. I'm just gonna pause for a second.
That's okay. In the meantime, Karina, while you fix the slideshow, we have a question in the chat. Where can we access the recording for this event? I assume it'll be part of the write-up, Pat, that will be sent around. Is that correct? I saw you come off mute, but I can't hear if you're speaking. I suggest you'd sign up for our mailing list. The link is just above in the chat, and it will be sent out to the mailing list once recordings are available.
Okay, so that is, yeah, thanks to our sponsors. Karina, I think you may be having some technical issues. Of course, if you or your organization are interested in providing any contributions, please email the email that we provided, the UTRI email. I know for our judges, they're going to need about 9 more minutes before they return and announce the winner. So we're going to take a break. We'll be returning at 7:20 p.m. So everyone hang tight. Okay, so we're 1 minute away from the break. I see our judges are back. So on to the moment that we're all been waiting for. The most difficult part of the night for the judges, I'll say I'm happy I'm not in their shoes at this point. So for David, Michelle, Tyrone, let's see, 719, we're ready to hear the results.
All right. Thank you. I'm wearing my Badger sweater tonight, so I get to be the one to badger you with the feedback and the results. Thanks to my fellow judges for the honor of being the one to speak on all our behalves. So we're going to start first by saying, I know it's always said, but it's true, that it's very hard to judge these kind of competitions. The quality across the board is incredible. You know, you guys put so much work and so much thought into very different projects. So they're hard to compare because they're all great and because they're all different. So everyone has achieved a lot tonight. Of course, it is a competition, so we do have to have some winners, and we get into it. So before we get to the winners, we're going to give our thanks to the 3 groups who will not be taking home a prize. You know, each of the groups took on an ambitious piece of work and gave us food for thought to savor this evening. All of you should be incredibly proud for taking this initiative to respond to COVID-19 by actively collaborating on a means to confront the problem at a time when it's really easy to just retreat into our private lives and, you know, watch a lot of TV in our PJs. So, you know, congratulations for being here and for bringing enthusiasm, professionalism, and community spirit. You know, this spirit that you brought tonight is going to serve you much longer than the cash prize would have. So I hope that's a comfort to you. These 3 teams are Team 1, Equitable, Transport, and the Post-COVID GTHA. So just a few remarks to leave you with. This range of topics you explored was really impressive. You took on a lot, and there was a lot of effort put into learning how benchmark cities are operating and thinking differently and what that might mean for Toronto. It left us wondering, you know, how could we bring that home to Toronto? I think it could have been a little tighter on the applicability to the local context, which, you know, one of the criteria that we were looking for. So that was kind of where we were looking for more. You know, ultimately, when you're preparing a recommendation report like this, it comes down to that, you know, what, so what, and who cares, right? And so as a group, you took on a really big what, and next time, we know you'd probably channel your energy so that you're sort of putting equal thought into the what, the so what, and the who cares, and really pinning your recommendations on someone local, so we know who to, you know, take numbers from. So great work, big thoughts, big ideas, and we look forward to seeing you kind of bring them home in your future work. Second team in this group is Project 6, Improving TTC's Congestion Problems Through Equity, Sustainability, and Enjoyability Approach. So again, our compliments go to you for doing a really good job defining those 3 values that, you know, were in the title of your presentation and really came out strong in your paper and your presentation both. You made a really good case in your paper, especially for those who didn't get the benefit of seeing it. You ask them for a copy, you know, about talking about Broadview Station and why a case study there. You know, given that you clearly established that there are dire financial straits of the TTC, the power of cheap and cheerful nudges, and the centrality of essential workers who are at a financial disadvantage, it was a little bit confusing to see the high-tech smartphone app be the heart of your solution. You know, you had other ideas in your paper, and we would have loved to see those fleshed out a bit more and more sort of put into the how to make the app really sing. And you spoke to that really well in the question period in this presentation. So we know you've got those ideas. You know, it's one of those things that a good idea, just like a good joke, it's all about timing. So you did a really good idea here. And I think probably as the COVID recovery evolves, those kind of tech-based solutions are really going to have a place in transit. But at the moment, it's sort of the problem you described and the answer you gave had a little bit of a time lapse between them that was a stumbling point for us. But all in all, really brilliant and really good work. We're excited to see these ideas go places. And the third group, third team in this group, you know, is the Towards the Resilient Airport, implementing COVID testing at Pearson Airport. So to this group, congratulations on a really well-defined and very pertinent topic. You know, it takes a lot of courage to put a big fish like the airport in your crosshairs and tell them how they stack up against 50 other peers, no less. So, you know, that was a bold question and really well defined and really specific. In many ways, that benchmarking work you did to compare the 50 airports was a major research accomplishment, and it was something we would have loved to see showcased a little bit more. You know, something like a summary table, even sort of showing, you know, your 4 lines of defense and which airports are using them, and some of the great work that you did could have sung a little louder in your paper. That being said, you were really ambitious with what you did portray about the calculations and the need and the capacity for testing, and made it seem really, you know, tangible. So we would have loved to then see you take that next step in tangibility to some of the practical hurdles, like where in the airport is there enough space, you know, departures, what about airport workers? So everything you did was great, and we just had more questions of where it could go next, you know, if time were no object, and so on. So, you know, the takeaway there really is that the user experience is the latest school of thought. So it's that, you know, once you've got your idea in place, what does your user need? You know, so the airport, they'd probably benefit from a summary table or some of those practical questions answered. So, you know, it's our job to give you some lessons learned and takeaway. It was hard to tease out the what's lacking because like I say, these papers were all incredible, and we were really lucky to read them and hear them again tonight. So please, a round of applause for the group who brought us these papers. And now we turn our attention to the winners of the competition. So just like your peers on the other teams, you are to be congratulated on rising to this occasion with enthusiasm and professionalism and spirit, and that's going to serve you into your careers. And then we also get to congratulate you with a prize. So that's fun. Let's do that now. In third place, this group invited us to think about whether new circumstances call for new service models and expand our concern beyond COVID to look at system resilience writ large. In third place is the Integrating On-Demand Transit into Urban Transit Networks During Disruption Scenarios group. So just because you win doesn't mean you don't get criticism. You know that we all have things to learn. So, you know, where to go from here. The topic you chose has such deep roots, even from before the pandemic. There's a lot out there about feasibility and implementation, and you know, you spoke to that really well in your question period, and love to see that in your report because it is a real life thing that's happening in the world, and you want to see it happen here. Really, kind of getting ahead of your critics is something that you did well and could do even more of. That said, your paper and presentation really highlighted how COVID is only one of many shocks that a transit system experiences, how traditional transit, you know, has been being under the microscope for a while now, and this is just an even, you know, more zoomed in lens. And we really thought you did a good job highlighting the parts of the city that are likely to be suffering the most and that could benefit the most from intervention. So great work, really bringing this thing that's happening and swirling in the world to sort of home to this moment and to this geography. All in all, it's really making it feel pertinent right here, right now. So congratulations to the place. In second place is the group that brought us a really exciting proposal for how to collaborate on problem solving and community building in this new normal when most of us are doing living online. So that is, of course, the Sense and Scalability, upscaling neighborhood solutions to citywide problems. So, you know, looking for a constructive pointer is that your enthusiasm to share your solution meant the problem got short shrift. You know, we could have spelled out a little clearly how COVID has heightened this perennial need. But that being said, you know, this solution makes such a strong case for itself. The way you explain the solution makes the problems that it solves very obvious. You envisioned it very vividly, thinking through not only benefits, but some of the risks as well, which you spoke to in the Q&A, and some of the pragmatics around what are the likely stumbling blocks and how have people got over it. It was especially helpful that you preempted that critique that often comes to ideas like this. People will often say, oh, it's so imaginative, you know, this is blue sky thinking, but you preempted that by showing us examples from around the world that are in practice now, and sort of getting ahead of that, you know, utopian risk that some people see these things as so far out. So you really made it feel real and available. a note that your graphic design in your paper and in your presentation both were really impactful and really brought this idea to life. And it can be hard sometimes to make ideas like this visual. So a good job on that as well. Thank you for being imaginative and advancing digital citizenship that is flourishing now more than ever. And so that means that in first place is team number 2, Beyond Downtown, Strategies to Expand Bike Share Toronto in the Suburbs. And for this team, we had to reach deep to find constructive feedback. Apart from some nitpickeries about labels and legends on your maps, their really only way to improve this work would have been to take steps towards implementing it. For all the criteria we were given to judge by, you guys really, it's like you had our crib sheet. The problem was very well defined. The COVID imperative was very well explained. You know, the tying it to the pressure now at COVID, but the enduring pressure that's happening before, during, and after COVID. And in the presentation, and especially in your paper, you struck a great balance between looking outward for role models, doing some benchmarking in other cities, but also looking inward in a really nuanced way to understand the Toronto case, what is and is not working here. And that led to you having a really robust and multifaceted solution that was at the same time sort of focused, clear, and pertinent. So it made it feel real and achievable and left us feeling very hopeful. So thank you for that, and congratulations. Round of applause.
Oh, congratulations, everyone. So that concludes the competition. Does team 2, anyone want to say a few words? Nisha, Pooja, anyone there?
Hi. Hi. we are having butterflies. We are so happy, and thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, judges. Thank you so much, Matt and Katie.
we really thank all the interviewees for presenting their amazing suggestions and leading us to the right path. It wouldn't have been possible without them, for sure.
And just to echo what so many other people have said in the chat, that this was actually a super useful learning experience for us. And I think it's a really great initiative. So thanks for facilitating it.
Amy, Drisha, Pooja, congratulations. Job well done. We'll be in touch. For all the teams, we'll be in touch following tonight's event. Again, just thank you to all the students and recent graduates who participated in this event. I know it was a difficult time with COVID and entering the competition with a lot of unknowns and still participating. Like, just thank you so much. The hard work really showed in your submissions and the presentations today. You should really be proud of yourselves. I would like to just say, just on behalf of myself and the colleagues and everyone across the industry who attended this event, you know, we recognize it's a hard time for students and recent graduates. And if there's anything that anyone on the line could do, you know, please reach out to all of us. Thank you to all our mentors from across the industry. They weren't just U of T alumni, they were just transit industry and transportation industry experts. Thank you so much for your time and mentorship. I think it really helped the students, you know, and graduates, you know, really see the realistic industry focus that they needed for this competition. David, Michelle, Tyrone, thank you so much for the time to evaluate these submissions. It was not easy. Last year, it was not easy as well. And again, thank you so much for your time. And finally, I'll just like to, on behalf of the UTAN members, thank you so much everyone for attending today. Thank you, Karina, Michelle, and the rest of the committee for helping in this event. There are more events to come. I'm sure we are, again, we're also responding to COVID, so we're going to try to figure out more ways to bring both the alumni, students, and friends of the committee together. So thank you very much, everyone. And that concludes our event for tonight. And again, congratulations, Trisha, Pooja, Amy. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Okay, so everyone have a great night.